još jednom dobrodošli nazad. Nadam se da vam prijao od pauzice za kafu. Meni jeste, mada trebala malo kratko, osjećao se kao pit stopu da sam bio, ono kratko kafica, brzo. Sad će za vikend formula, gledate formulu? Ne više. Ni manje, tačno. Mene najinteresantnije bio formula i pit stop, samo zbog toga gledam. Kao klinac sam se ložio ono za 12 sekundi, ljudi za mene, gume, gorivo, sve, za 12 sekundi, pa su kasnije smanjili te rekord na 7 sekundi, sad za 3 sekunde sve za mene, ja ne znam šta rade oni ljudi, za 3 sekunde, gorivo, gume, sve. Možete zamisliti tim srpskih automehaničkih pit stopova, na šta bi to ličilo, zamislite, onako svi pit stopovi, kako izgledali, zamislite sliku naših pit stopa, recimo, onako sve haos u njemu, ispred stoji naravno Jukić na panjelju, onako, svi pit stopovi spremni, sede, samo ispred našeg stoji jedan šegrt na praksi, vjerovatno, a majstor pozadi pije kakicu i gleda onako Pirelijev kalendar iz 2005, jer su tad bile najbolje ribe na njemu, onako, i evo je formula, stiže tu u pit stop, i viče, majstore, hitno je, majstore, a evo ga, majstor izlazi, samo izlazi se njegovom alatkom, onako, čačkarice, gdje izlazi majstor, onako, Japanac, a? Crkva. Kad ja kažem golf je golf, niko me ne sluša, ali majstore, hitno je, brzo žurim, čekaj. Majstore, žurim. Žuriš, pa ti dobro da si do ovde stigo, da. Majstore, hitno, samo gume govorimo, ja baš žurim. Ko ti ovo radio, Bože, ništa, mali ti daj getoru i geznojstvu, a ti dođe po kola za 3 dana i, Bože moj, tako je prilike u mojoj glavi izgledao neki srpski tim formule. Now I'm gonna switch to English because it's time to announce our final 2 guests for today, and we are all very pleased to have those 2 amazing people today with us, so please give them a round of applause. We have for you Maaret Pyhäjärvi and Mr. Llewellyn Falco. Please give them a warm applause.
I'm Llewellyn Falco. I am a developer by trade and an Agile technical coach.
And I'm Maaret Pyhäjärvi. I'm a tester by trade and I work with a team of 10 developers. We wanted to share with you a bit of a story from the beginning. It was a story about us working in an Agile team, developing a feature. It was a weekly meeting, and the project manager mentioned that now would be a great time to work on this particular feature. We had a bit of a discussion about that, and I'm sure we agreed that would be a good time to do it. So,
and it was a fairly straightforward feature. There was a JavaScript component that we had sort of handcrafted to do lists and forms, and sort of like a grid. And we were using a lot of the Kindle UI stuff, and they had just come out with a grid, and it looked like we could use theirs, and it would give us what we wanted, plus the look and feel would be the same. So we just sort of wanted to port the thing that we had to the newer component. And this was also sort of a good chance to try some TypeScript, which we were very excited about. It supported TypeScript. Hey, let's move it over, let's do some TypeScript.
And usually, as kind of in the weekly meetings, when we get introduced to these new features that we're supposed to do, we had a bit of a chat about the feature in advance, like, okay, TypeScript, is there a skills thing here, and maybe not. And, just had kind of a basic feel of what we're going to be developing.
Yeah. And, it was supposed to work like it worked before. It's not like a big deal. I mean, it takes time. It took me some time, about a week, programming away, and I got it working, and I thought it was pretty good. So I gave it back. Sorry?
Next one.
So I got it working. And of course, before we can go live with it, we have to check it out. So I hand it over to Maaret and say, hey, can you check this out?
Yes. So I come in as a tester. And of course, since my developer is asking me nicely to test that, I will test that as the work always goes. In the first 5 minutes, I'm going through kind of the basic flow of like, hey, let's get a feel of how this feature now works, and I run into this problem. So right away, kind of in the beginning of my testing, I'm realizing that that I need to go and write a bug report. There's a little bit of a problem here. In the user interface, you can select kind of many things at once, the things that Llewellyn was showing that he was learning. You can select many things at once, and I've been able to do that before. So I want to, again, select many things at once. And for some reason, right now, I can't do more than one selection. So what I do is I write a bug report. It takes me 10 minutes about, because I'm kind of a fast writer in there. I put that in Jira, and I even mention, shouting out to Llewellyn and saying, hey, here's a bug. You need to start looking at that. So it's kind of a really fast feedback in the sense that I just look at that.
Yeah, I understand. It's not the tester's fault. I did this work. It wasn't right. Like, I made a mistake. It's a weird mistake. I totally forgot. I mean, the person who wrote this wasn't me, and it was written a long time ago. And I got it to work. There's this extra part that I forgot about. And, you know, I mean, the good part about this is all this extra work is why we get to be employed as programmers, right? Like, there's good job security in that. It's going to take a lot longer to redo this. But I do have to redo it all, right? It's harder to deal with many things than it is to deal with a single thing. And so I have to change what I'm going to do. I have to talk and sort of change what I was planning to do this week to adjust the fact that I'm now going to be redoing this. But, you know, this happens all the time. It's sort of what software development is.
Fail fast, that's what they say in Agile.
So, out of curiosity...
Out of the story, is this something that you've experienced? Does it sound familiar? Yeah? A lot of nods, even in the back, right? Yeah? So it sounds familiar. So we kind of wanted to share this common experience. It's very typical in an Agile team. But in our story, there's a bit of a caveat here.
This is a complete lie. This
story
never happened to us. We want to tell you what did happen, but we needed to start with this so that our story would sort of make sense.
So we want to tell you what actually happened. It was one of these days at the office where we had a meeting, meaning we would sit together on one computer, mobbing, not programming, and we would talk about the feature that we were about to do, all the usual discussions that we would have, but we don't really talk so long before we do things. We just kind of started working on the thing together.
It's an odd thing, right? People are happy to call a meeting to talk about work, but sometimes we get a little bit skittish when we want to actually do work. So we started working together, started building this feature together. Both the developers, but also the tester.
Also me as the tester. So what happened is that in mobbing, we kind of run this regular cycle where everybody takes their turns on the keyboard. That's the role called the driver. And I was also, as a tester, a non-programming tester, I was also taking my turns on the keyboard for the 4 minutes, typing whatever other people would tell me, and we were just implementing this feature piece by piece.
And as we were going along, we got to the part of the list where we had to select one thing. And I said, oh, you only have to select one thing at a time.
And I also kind of, I listened to this discussion going back and forth with the developers, like everybody nodding, kind of like in unison agreement. Yeah, one thing, yeah, sure, one thing. 9 people in the room, 9 things, yes, one thing is that kind of the impression there. And all of a sudden, I noticed myself, even without really thinking about it, voicing to somebody, and what are you talking about? Are you meaning how many things the user needs to select? They're actually selecting many things at once.
And so I said, oh, many things, many things. That would have been a problem if we got it wrong.
And the whole mistake never actually happened. Half an hour, or actually a couple of hours later, when we started doing the retrospective, the 9 developers in the team never even remembered this half a second, split second thing happening. It just vanished.
So, the benefits of working together in this particular case.
There's a lot of potential wasted effort. If you compare the first story and the second story, there's a lot of wasted effort. There's the wasted effort for the developer in building something that isn't what the user wanted. It's not gonna be okay if it loses this multi-selection feature that was there. Even if it's a reasonable thing to happen, it's not gonna be okay. So there was wasted effort in building something and then untangling it away from the code to get the things working. There's wasted effort testing, even if the effort wasn't big on the first cycle. There's the other cycles. It came back to me again, it could come back to me, and if I need to do this again and again and try more problems, there's a lot of this cycling between the two of us. And then there's the effort fixing.
All of this is extra effort that we didn't have to go through. But there's more than this. There's overall time to deliver. We weren't able to deliver this at the end of our sprint like we wanted to, because I had to redo it. It wasn't deliverable. So not only does it take more effort, I can't release as quickly. I can't get stuff out as nicely.
And I think maybe the most important thing out of these two stories is really, as a tester, I often end up hurting programmer egos. As much as I try to be nice, as much as programmers try to be nice to me, there's an ego at play when there's a delay in the feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to. I try to look at the bigger picture. I try to be the bigger person. I try to remember that when Maaret says, this code doesn't work, she's not saying your code doesn't work, or worse, you are a bad programmer. But it is my code. I did put a lot of time into it. It doesn't work.
It's kind of hard to not get a bruised ego in these cases. And the whole idea of making it a split-second thing, the feedback that I'm giving as a tester, make it a split-second thing, in the sense that he doesn't even realize that I was giving him feedback that he completely missed and never had. There's a lot of power in that.
This is the difference between when you create things separately and then put it together versus when you actually collaborate and actually make the thing together. It's something that's been very powerful for us. And it ended up being really nicely, but it didn't really start that way.
So in this talk, we really wanted to share with you some stories about developer-tester collaboration and kind of introduce you into the journey that led us into the experience of having a great time together now. There's a lot of ups and downs, so that's why we call it tales. There's a bit of a storyline here, and we kind of invite you into sharing of our journey.
So, we'll go all the way back to the beginning. This is almost a year before the story we just told you. The first time that the two of us sat down and paired together.
So, if you want more information about the actual experiences from the time when they happened, there's always a reference in the slides here to my blog, because I have a habit of trying to remember things that happened to me by blogging about them, on average 2 times a week, so it's a bit of a heavy blog to follow. But the story here is so that I needed to learn unit testing to help my team's developers. Llewellyn isn't actually working with my team. He's an Agile coach and consultant. He might, or actually does visit us occasionally, but he's not part of my team. My team needed to learn unit testing. The developers were not particularly into unit testing, so I felt, what's the best way that I can help my developers? What if I learn a bit of unit testing myself? And I asked Llewellyn for help with that. Remember the day?
I do. Well, first of all, I remember it because how nice is it to have a tester who sees their job as, my job is to help my developers, right? That is a big change from a lot of what I had seen. And so I was very happy to sit down and we pulled up some of your code. You had access to the Visual Studio too, which is also, something that's nice. A lot of times I've been in shops where the testers didn't have access to the actual production code or the production environment. You did.
Yeah, I did have access to the environment because I had been working to get the access for a couple of years. And it turned out I did have the access, but the build didn't actually run on my machine yet. So I would have needed a developer to help with that. I was lucky to have Llewellyn help me with that.
So that was the first step, is just getting stuff working. once we got stuff working, we could take a look into the actual code and see how to start unit testing it. So we should
with all of these.
Oh, sorry.
So with all of these kind of things where I ask help from Llewellyn, he's an agile coach, so he apparently has a special way of doing things. He said, sure, I'll help you, but let's pair. And he introduced me to this way of pairing where he would have me sit on the keyboard typing for him. And very soon when we were trying to add the unit tests, I wanted to kind of make sense of this whole thing somehow in my head. I was asking a lot of questions about, like, hey, this unit test that we're trying to do, how does it relate to all of these concepts in the domain and the application that I know of? Like, what am I actually testing here? I had a lot of questions. And he wasn't really into answering any of those. He was kind of like saying, like, let's just do what I tell you to do. And I was feeling like really frustrated, actually so frustrated that I actually stood up and said, I'm not going to do this with you. This is too painful, too awful. I don't want to do this. It's not taking us anywhere. I can't make the connection. It doesn't make any sense.
So, not my first time pairing. Not my first time having this experience. I know the trap. I know that if I start explaining and answering all her questions, that we're going to spend the entire morning answering questions. We're not going to actually do anything, and it's going to get labeled as a waste of time. So I know that's a trap. And I know that she doesn't trust me. That we need to move forward, but she doesn't want to move forward. And I've tried to beat that with logic. That does not go well.
It would not have worked on me. I was kind of worked up already emotionally at that point, really frustrated. Any logic would have been wasted on me. So instead what I hear him say is,
maybe you can just trust me for 7 minutes. Would that be okay?
And I look at him like, seriously? 7 minutes? We've already wasted like 10 at least here, and we're not going anywhere. So 7 minutes. What's going to happen in 7 minutes? Nothing. But sure, if you want me to play this game, but sure, I can give you 7 minutes. We can waste 7 minutes. It's better than having this argument. So I said, okay, tell me what to do. I'm not going to ask anything more. I'll play by the rules for 7 minutes, but nothing more.
So I take out my phone and I set the 7-minute timer, and I now have 7 minutes to do something. So we start writing the tests. First, because Maaret was very new to Visual Studio at that point, I'm talking in letters, T-E-S. And then I start being able to talk in words and then eventually concepts. But in the very beginning, it's very mechanical, very letter-based.
And I'm writing these things as he tells me to. All the lines of code start emerging, things around the testing start emerging. And I start to see that, hey, actually, here's a test that I can understand, or at least I'm seeing that we're going to a direction where I can understand things. So when the 7 minutes is over and the timer goes off, kind of like keeping track of the promise of 7 minutes will stop here, I turn the timer on again and say, you got another 7 minutes, so let's continue.
And that's how we got started. 7 minutes of trust at a time.
So what Llewellyn did, what I didn't actually understand right back then, but when I was writing about this in my blog, I realized that he had tricked me. He had really tricked me. I had no idea that there was this technique that he was using on me, but the technique was really powerful. He was inviting me to trust him for a short period of time. A period of time that was long enough for him to actually show me actual progress, if I would give that time to him. But it was short enough for me to feel like I didn't waste my life arguing with a developer who will never understand a tester anyway.
And trust is built over, well, first, trust can be given, right? The reason I ask for it is because you can give it. But it gets sustained by lots of little successes, not one big one, right? So lots of little 7 minutes of working, that's really powerful. It's better than, a week, and then at the end of the week it turned out to be okay.
The basic mechanism that you could hear from the story that we just shared with you is that I was on the keyboard. I was being the driver, and we were using a mechanism called strong-style pairing. The idea with strong-style pairing is that if you have an idea, you don't get to be on the keyboard, but then the navigator who speaks up about the idea and through words transfers that information about what needs to be done to the person who's in hands on the keyboard.
There's a lot of advantages to this. One, it avoids a lot of the common pitfalls of pair programming. Pair programming is a very useful technique, but I find it to be one of the more controversial techniques from extreme programming and of the Agile practices in general. Right? I think it's one of the more difficult ones to do. And if you do it without strong style, it's very easy that the person at the computer is going too fast for the other person to keep up.
And with this style, I was the newbie on the keyboard, and if I didn't understand the concept that he would tell me, I would just look at him puzzled, and he would go into the keystrokes. Or if I felt like I was disconnected with the keystrokes, I didn't know exactly where I was supposed to be, a kind of puzzled look, and he would already be telling me the right direction to be.
So it forces this connection. Earlier they talked about it's not the physical location, it's the mental connection. This forces that mental connection to be very strong. We should also mention the general concept of long-term gains versus short-term gains.
Like a lot of 7 minutes is basically what we are talking about here. The idea that the whole thing kind of comes from little pieces of work that we do together.
And so, if you think about hunting, if you want to eat tonight, hunting is a good idea. You can go out and you can catch a meal. If you want to eat tonight, farming is a bad idea. It's just not going to work. You put seeds in the ground, you're not eating tonight. But farming is literally what allowed us to move to civilization. It's what took us out of being hunters and gatherers. Everything around us is a result that we have a constant supply of food coming to us on a regular basis. And the stuff that we did worked the same way.
And we kind of were planting seeds for future collaboration. These were the early days of our collaboration, but they were the foundation on which we could build on any other experiences that we would end up having together.
And we want to tell you this because when you go out and you start learning new skills, whether it's around collaboration or any of the things you might have picked up today, don't expect the results to be amazing on day one. These teams take time and investment before they pay back their work. And it took time for us. So let's continue down that journey as these seeds start to stick.
So later on in our life, we had an experience where I didn't blog about it. We were doing pairing for the first time and things that kind of were my territory, exploratory testing, working on my own application that I work with at work, doing something that I was supposed to do at that moment. I just invited Llewellyn to pair with me so that we would have an experience of that. And it turned to be an interesting experience.
Well, I was excited about it, right? Because I had heard about exploratory testing, and I'm a programmer, so I test my code, right? I know what testing's about, and I have all these things that I'm sure I get to share and show. And so I was like, hey, this is a chance for me to show that I'm also good at testing.
Yeah, and I was kind of also excited about this. I get to show my stuff, the exploration side. We had already been working on unit testing and code stuff before this, but we'd never done any of my activities before. So I was like, hey, this is a great opportunity. So we were testing this, there was a new dialogue in our application, so we were testing the application, and I was clicking through my way to get to the right dialogue, and when I got to the dialogue, I said, I wonder what size this is.
I know how big something is. There's a thing called the screen ruler. It will tell you pixel by pixel. You can pull it up on your screen. So I went to the internet and I downloaded it and I brought it up and I showed her how to measure it, and 339 pixels exactly, that's how big it is.
Yeah, and some relevant minutes later, I had a screen ruler on my computer for a thing where I was kind of wondering, does it fit my screen? Is my resolution the thing that helps me kind of measure these things? So we spent a lot of time on a tool that he wanted to show me, which was by no means relevant to anything that I was supposed to do. And by the end of, I think, our half an hour session, we hadn't done anything that I wanted to do. We had only looked at his stuff.
Just for the record, I didn't realize at the time that this wasn't going so well.
So what we learned is really that you need to be actively making space for new ideas. When you have a pair of people who have different backgrounds and different interests and different task types that they will bring into the table, it is really important that you don't go and overrule the other, but you make space for the ideas that the other person might have to bring into that table.
And if you don't make space for the new ideas, even if you don't think they're good ideas, and even if it turns out that they're not good ideas, it's worth making that space to learn about them before you come to that conclusion, rather than ahead of time. And the downside is, when you make this mistake, when you don't provide space for the new things, if you are dealing with someone who's shy or introverted, they usually don't come back and talk to you. Fortunately, Maaret has very strong opinions. So we got to do this again.
But before we did it again, we needed to really remember, why are we actually having all of these issues? Why is there so many problems? Why do we need to share these problems and tales of problems? And kind of took a look at the way we've gone into this issue.
And so the weird thing is, Maaret and I are of similar ages. And we had very similar beginnings, right? We both were interested in computers at young ages. Middle school for me and high school for you. We both went to university. We both started to study. But then things started to diverge, to separate. I started developing programs. I got really excited about what I could create on the computer. I started connecting with my community. Started to find people that, I could look up to. People like Bob Martin, Michael Feathers, DHH. People who could pull me and make me a better programmer.
And similarly, since I started identifying as a tester, I found my own idols. I found Ken Kainer, absolutely wonderful person. I found Elizabeth Hendrickson, started learning from her. I found James Bach and Michael Bolton and learned amazing things from these two guys.
And I am disconnected enough from this world that when I hear Michael Bolton or James Bach, I'm thinking there's some kind of weird music thing, maybe. Like, I have no idea what she's talking about.
And when I hear about Bob Martin and the other people that nobody looks up to, I look at that and I'm like, yeah, I've heard about that. I've actually read their books. I know that stuff. I just don't care enough about that stuff. So there was a clear disconnect. We came from completely different communities, and we were grown by those communities.
So now that we've slowly separated, we needed to start to come together again.
So we tried again. My type of work, exploratory testing, in order to prepare for a course that we were doing together. And this time, having learned something from our past experiences of ending up with look at me, Pyhäjärvi, Laura said that he's just gonna be my hands this time. He's just gonna be there doing the things that I want to do, and I get to be the one who tells where to go.
Yeah. So making space is the main technique for that is shutting up. Not something that comes that naturally to me, but it was worth it. He started to show me a lot of different things I'd never seen before.
So I was testing this application. I had not seen it much myself either, so I was really exploring it as a new user. And whenever I would see something like, hey, there's this canvas here, let me make a note while I'm seeing the canvas. Oh, I'm seeing this menu here, it's connected to the canvas in this way. And I'm putting down all of these concepts that I'm seeing on the user interface. If any of you were in my session today, you've seen the application now, so you have some idea. But again, it's these concepts that I'm just mapping and putting on the mind map that we were creating together. Or I was actually telling Llewellyn to write this, write that.
And so, mind mapping, right? Like everybody knows mind mapping. You saw today, he had them do personal mind maps. You get a whole bunch of different flavors of it, but it's all the same thing. I think anyone who's gone through 4th grade knows about a mind map. I've done mind maps before.
And then we ended up in this one point of our testing where I learned about a new concept, something that surprised me and changed the whole world view of how I viewed that application. Like, oh, you can do this in combination with these. And I took the mind map, one cell of it, and I just dragged it in a different place. I started reorganizing it. And Llewellyn was like, whoa, what's going on?
It's crazy. And so when you draw a mind map on paper, it's a great way to get ideas out. But this concept that I could use it to reorganize and structure thoughts, I'd never seen that happen. And if you're not using a virtual mind map, you can't do it. You can't restructure things. I'm a programmer. Organizing and structuring the world is what I do. It's amazing to see this tool help in that process.
So Llewellyn was super excited about a very simple thing that I do.
I'm still very excited about this.
Yeah, he's still super excited about that, maybe sometimes even too much. But he was excited about this. And when we were continuing the testing with that application and we were adding more stuff, he didn't become the person who would be telling me what to do, but he started suggesting, like, hey, did you see that concept here? Maybe we should make a note of that. Or did you see this connection? Maybe we should make a note of that. But he would always come back and confirm with me if that was the route where I wanted us to be going as a pair.
So the first part of this is, even if it's obvious to you, and you've been using these tools for a long time, they're very, very obvious to you. You take them for granted. But it could be special for me. And I have found this time and time again. Anytime I go out of the normal place that I am, into some place where I really feel out of place, whether it's when I went to testing conferences, or when I went to database conferences, when I went to my first .NET conference after being a Java programmer for a long time, when I went to my first Agile conference after just being a regular programmer, things that everyone else was taking for granted, they were brand new to me. It's a great way to learn a lot, is to go way outside what's normal.
And for me, it would not have even occurred to me that if I was teaching him, a developer, about exploratory testing, that I would actually need to teach the fact that electronic mind maps are really morphable. You can morph them into whatever understanding that you have. And that's a core concept for anything exploratory, because you're going to be learning, and learning means you're going to be changing your mind. Like, it's such a basic thing that it never occurred to me that it was something you would mention. I also learned, looking at the way Llewellyn behaved this time, is that you can actually be really active. You can really be making a difference in the testing, in the pair format, without being bossy and without taking over. So he was really being very good at the would you want to go this way? I'm offering you more information. I'm being your second pair of eyes. I'm reviewing the documentation you're giving or creating here. I'm actively suggesting stuff. But if I would say, I'm choosing not to use time on that thing right now, he would still go to the direction where I was going. So this took us still forward. It was yet another day at the office. At the Grand office, and this was one of the days when Llewellyn joined me and my team, and we wanted to work out on unit testing again. Now that I had some basic understanding of it, I felt like my developers could actually use some of the direct stuff that Llewellyn could bring to my team, and I invited Llewellyn over to mob with us for one afternoon. And we were working on Excel that day.
Yeah. So testing in Excel is something that can be complicated. I have an open source framework that I wrote for testing called Approval Test, and it allows you to test more complicated things. So we can test Excel. And so we started to open it up, and we started to test Excel, and we generated these reports that would end up being Excel documents, and then we would verify them. And we ran into this problem where if we forgot to close it, Excel would lock the file.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, as a tester, for me it's typical that when I see something like a problem like this, I put it on my mental checklist and say, oh, we need to remember to close it. And that was, by the way, one of my main purposes in this session. I would be telling the developers, oh, remember to close the Excel. Oh, remember, the Excel is still open, it's going to fail again. And we kind of managed to not have the Excel open.
Yeah, that's a strength, I think, of testers, is they're good at both discipline and like following repetitive processes well.
And then I was surprised, he kind of came with this idea that he was kind of working on his own computer for a while, doing some searches. He didn't talk to us what he was doing. And he said, let's re-navigate for a while. And then he started telling us to add stuff, one line actually, into the code without any explanations again. This time I trusted without any arguments. We write the line of code and then we run the test. I was again trying to remind people, no, we need to close the Excel. And one said, no need to. So the line of code was for the problem of not having the Excel block things anymore.
Yeah, so it turns out there's a command line argument you can pass in that says, hey, don't block this file. And while testers are particularly good at following repetitive processes, the entire reason we go into programming is to not have to do that. Right? We are especially not good at following repetitive processes. They bug us, they annoy us. We want to change it.
So it wasn't annoying me anymore either, because it just, vanished and I kind of forgot about it. And we just continued working on trying to make different calls so that we could generate this Excel programmatically, so that we could unit test the Excel stuff. And we could make the Excel with certain tweaks. We could make it reproducible on a very small scope of Excel, and we were adding all these kinds of information. There was, like, for example, there was this footer information. It's supposed to have project information for us, and there's information about the change and all kinds of things.
And this is a fairly large amount of code, and it's existing code that's been out there for a while. So, of course, there's tons of little bugs inside of it. And as we are getting to the point where we can tweak it very easily and see it, we're discovering all of these things that aren't working. It doesn't handle certain empty cases. It doesn't handle like boundary conditions well. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's just not handling that well.
So I have a group of developers in the room, and they go crazy with the idea that they can improve their code right now.
So I will say, like, as a developer, you give me a problem, I will give you a solution.
So what I do there is I follow the things that are going on for a while, and then I ask, is this really a good use of time? And then I explain that actually for our end users, this is what they will use this feature on. And I get a puzzled look from the developers.
Yeah, so end users. Who cares about them?
Oh, come on, you didn't say that. It's like, what?
No, I didn't say that. But I've been around developers enough to know that that's not what we think about. Right? I've been burned by it enough to know that we should think about it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm good at thinking about it. And of course, I'm coaching here, so I don't really know your system or your end users at all. So when she says, is this something we should look at? I ask the programmers, is this something we should look at? And they look at me with that exact expression of, why would I know what the users do?
I also remember this afterwards discussion where we talked with the developers about how do I know all that stuff? How do I know what the end users do? And I have this puzzle look. I go and talk to them, don't you?
No, we do not. But this was surprising to me because as a coach, I also know that when you need to know what's going on with the end users, you talk to a product owner. And we didn't have a product owner there, but somehow my tester knew all the things I would expect my product owner to know.
And a little more usually as well. So again, talking to the product owner, talking to the end users, trying to figure out how things are connected, what makes it valuable, what might threaten that value, it brings you to the position where you have an empirically based idea of what things you can do and should be able to do in the application.
So now, from the hundreds of things that are going a little bit wrong, we can focus on the ones that are actually important. And as an odd side effect, we're starting to understand a little bit of what our users might do, even if it's via proxy.
And all of this this whole session here that we had, it's been a great foundation for future work. I just realized like 2 weeks ago that based on the foundation that we laid on testing Excel, now we actually can test that painful testable feature by having changed the architecture around so that it's easier to test. It's no longer Excel when we get into it. So a lot of the realization that came out of this session has led my team into a much, much better place. So a few lessons here. We do think differently, developers and testers. And it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. You know, diverse teams build better products. It's a good thing if we have disagreements that we can talk about and then come to a conclusion with a better information. I can deal with tedium, boredom. I can do things easily. I can do the same things. I can tell myself it's not the same thing I'm doing because my mind is in a different place. But Llewellyn, as a developer, you might not be as strong enough.
Developers excel in laziness. This is what we're good at. The best developers are the laziest people you ever meet. So has some advantages. When things don't work for us, we make them so they do. We make them easier. We are actually willing to put a considerable amount of effort into being lazy.
I've noticed. And we've also kind of through this shared experience, we've realized that apparently the stuff that I take for granted as a tester, that I know the application, I know the users, and I pay special attention to those people, those stakeholders that I'm trying to be a proxy for. That's not quite clear always for the developers.
And this is super useful to me, because a lot of times I don't necessarily have access to the product owner when I want them, or sometimes the product owners that I'm working with aren't that good. And knowing that I might have like hidden product owners that are disguised as testers, that's super useful. Right? There's an entire resource that is now open that I didn't realize was even there.
So with all of these experiences, we end up talking together to different audiences a lot about testing. And then comes the trouble that when Llewellyn says testing, I hear
unit testing.
Yeah, he means unit testing. I don't quite recognize that type of testing that he talks about. And I think it's kind of the other way around. I attach a lot of things to my testing that are not part of his testing.
So with unit testing, I'm about creating things that last. Right? I get an example or a specification of what it is I want to build. I get feedback that I'm building it correctly, and then I have these unit tests that stay around and say, not only did it used to work, it still works. And if it stops, I'll tell you why. I get all of these things from my test. That's valuable to me.
And as an expert for a tester, I look at that and I see that's all valuable, but that's not all of it. There's a lot of this thinking around it that you need to do. There's a lot of things that are not binary, like you can't say this way or that way. You need to have a discussion, you need to decide on the direction. So my tests, they give me guidance instead of the absolutes. The way that I test, it gives me understanding and value and what's important and where I want to spend time on. It's a bit more fluffy in some ways, but we need that part too, because it's new information coming.
And that's something that if I hadn't sat with Maaret, if I hadn't seen her work, this whole idea that like my specialty is thinking, I know how to think. I can think too. Like you don't, until you experience that, you don't really appreciate the skill and expertise that goes into it. So even though she can tell me those things, I can't appreciate them until I actually get to be part of them.
And for my developers, usually when they think of this thinking, they think it's by accident that when they give me a new feature, they have tested it completely, I touch it and it crashes. So I have serendipity, ways of pushing the luck, and it's kind of based on me building various models of what things are connected, what developer skills are connected, but also what features in the application are connected.
So one of the questions that we get all the time is like, why do you work this way? how can that be efficient? And the thing is, it's not really about being efficient. When I work by myself, there are things I'm good at, and there are things that I'm not so good at. But if I'm working by myself, all of that goes into the code.
And similarly, if we work together, I have different strengths, I have different weaknesses, but what goes into the end result that we're doing right now is not my worst or his worst, it's the best of both of us.
So, it's about being effective over being efficient. And some of the things that we have learned over this process, over this journey,
Well, first of all, we learned that pairing and mobbing are really useful ways. They are not wasting our time, but they're actually saving us time, like the first story here today we shared. It saved us time in having to go and fix a thing that was never right, even if we thought for a moment that it was.
So save us time because we're growing. We're becoming more powerful. I learned that skilled testers exist.
And it seems funny that the developer who's been in the industry for 20 years needs to say this after 20 years in the industry, but I've heard this from so many developers that I think he's not special in that case.
For a lot of times I thought they just push buttons.
And I learned that regardless of the way that we testers often feel about developers, some developers really seriously do care about testing. And Llewellyn is a very much special case in that sense. Having built the whole approval test, the unit testing framework, he's an insane unit tester. Insane. I didn't think that would exist or that would be possible. And I'm noticing also that it's infectious.
We learn technical, like detailed things too. Like mind maps are amazing. Amazing! Try them.
And I learned very surprising things on the things where I didn't expect that Llewellyn had anything to share for me because I didn't have an actual need that I would recognize. I was using my slow work computer and I was being a bit with pain in that. I also had my home computer, which was a Mac and much more powerful. And Llewellyn introduced me to remote desktop so that I could run my slow computer on my fast computer and overall get things done a lot faster. I didn't even think about asking for that type of tool.
And then I learned about resources. I learned about skills that are in the companies I'm working with that I didn't even know existed. And I learned that testers don't report everything. I will tell you, before I worked with you hand in hand, I would have never guessed this because it felt like they were reporting every little thing they found. But it turns out they throw away a lot of things that they think we're not going to listen to.
It's just a lot to listen to. And I, in particular, out of this whole collaboration experience, I learned from my team that there's a way of doing unit tests that could actually help us get forward and take us from no unit testing because it never serves the developers' needs in my team, into actually them wanting to use the unit tests because they have a different way of doing them that they find more powerful.
And of course, lots of little tips and tricks that we learn, all the tools that we think we know. Once you've used a tool by yourself, for even just a couple days, you tend to plateau. And as soon as I started using things, we started learning lots of other ways to use the tools that we already had that we just forgot to keep exploring. So, if you want to pair a program, it's rather simple. Grab a person and sit at a keyboard. But if you want to try doing a mob, we suggest grab the guidebook. You can grab it on Repo, and you can move the slider all the way to free and use it. It just helps you in the first times if you're going to do stuff with a group.
All of these experiences, all of the tales and stories that we've shared with you today, they're really a part of a longer growth journey. we're not done working together. We're still teaching together. Occasionally, one comes to my office and we're working on something that is particularly difficult for my developer, because that's what he does for his work. But we've planted enough seeds that we've occasionally been also able to eat without going hunting, but actually from the farming and having new things come out of the collaboration.
And there's just now a great bounty of knowledge that comes going through this. But like you said, there's still a lot more to do, still a lot more to grow. We have a journey to continue. Hopefully you will continue on yours as well. Thank you.
Dame i gospodo, molim vas, još jedan velike pauze od jednog predavanja. To su bili Maaret, Pyhäjärvi, Falco.